Welcome to Galaxy Brains.
An infinite amount of cash.
I'm your host, Alex Thorne.
The U.S. banking system is sound and resilient.
Bitcoin made a new all-time high.
If you're not long, you're short.
Satoshi's going to come on there, laugh hysterically, go quiet, all Bitcoin's going to be erased.
Bitcoin's the best crypto asset.
Bitcoin is going to zero.
Welcome back to Galaxy Brains. As always, I'm your host, Alex Thorne, head of firm-wide research at Galaxy, and we have a fun episode today. Bim Netabibi from Galaxy Trading and I are going to talk a bit about the presidential election outcome with former President Donald Trump winning a second non-consecutive term of the presidency by pretty wide margin, only the second time in American history that's ever happened. No guest today, but I will also offer some thoughts on what it means for the crypto industry and markets, and offer some information about the level of the historic nature of the former president's win. This was not a very close race, it turned out. Before we get to that, I need to remind you to please refer to the link to the disclaimer in the podcast notes and note that none of the information in this podcast constitutes investment advice or an offer, recommendation, or solicitation by Galaxy or any of its affiliates to buy or sell any securities. Man, it is a new day. Let's hop right into it. Former President Trump, the 45th president of the United States, just won re-election. He will become the 47th president as well. I mentioned this at the top, but only one other president in American history has ever won a second non-consecutive term. Grover Cleveland first won in 1884. He lost to Benjamin Harrison in 1888 and then won it back in 1892. That is the only time this has ever happened. No president that served, many presidents have won re-election. Only two now have lost re-election and then come back to win again. And by the way, with the lawfare and the cases and the impeachments against Donald Trump, I think it's fair to say, which Grover Cleveland did not face, I think it's fair to say that this is the biggest political comeback in American history. And it wasn't close. Donald Trump will end up having won somewhere around 51.5 or 6% of the popular vote. That will be the biggest margin of popular vote victory for any Republican president since 1988, George H.W. Bush. So, right, I mean, in 16, Trump lost the popular vote and won the Electoral College. I don't know. We don't know yet. It's Wednesday, November 6th, and we don't know the final. They're still counting out west some of the stuff, so we don't know where the Electoral College or the popular vote will land, but it looks like incoming President Trump will win more than 310 electoral votes. It's a pretty decisive win. And I think George W. Bush's second term, he won with 271. So only one. He won by a two. You need 270 to win, right? So this is it's not very close, which is, I think, surprising to a lot of people. One group that it's not surprising to was prediction markets. Polymarket, Kalshi, Predictit, Interactive Brokers, the betting sites like the bookies. They've had Trump winning by healthy margins, those markets, at least since the Democratic National Convention in August, since after that. So, I mean, for most of the last month or two that I've been tracking it, those have all been around 60-40 favoring Trump. Now, those aren't saying what the margin of victory will be. That's where the market is for the odds of victory. And I just have to say that they ended up being extremely right. If it was 51-49 on Polymarket, then you would have said, wow, this is super close. And then him winning 51 or 49 or 48 in the popular vote, you'd be like, oh, that was accurate. No, but this was actually a major win in terms of Electoral College and popular vote. So 60-40 seems right. And by the way, during the election, as the results were coming in on Tuesday night, I was here in the office until about 1:45 in the morning with a bunch of us here that were watching the results and markets. And Polymarket was a leading indicator. When Florida, which was one of the first states to report because it's on the East Coast, right, started coming in very strong for Trump. He ends up winning Florida by 13%, absolute smash blowout victory. He won Miami-Dade County by 11%. For context, Hillary Clinton won it by 30, Miami-Dade County, and Biden won it by 7. So it's trending demographically towards Republicans over time, but plus 7 for Dems to minus 11 for Republicans is an 18-point swing election over election. Similarly, there is a county just west of Tampa called Pinellas County. which has correctly predicted the presidential outcome every election for like 5 or 8 elections in a row, except for 2000, when we saw that starting to break Trump, and he did win that county, and like I mentioned, the MDC, Miami-Dade County margin, you started to see Polymarket start to rise for Trump. People were watching this. Similarly, like as Georgia, North Carolina, and even Virginia was looking strong for Trump, Polymarket was pricing this in, getting higher and higher. It was 75-25. And you're looking at this and you're saying, dude, this has to be overpriced for Trump. Like that's a wild margin of victory. And in Kamala at 25%, when he's not going to win Virginia. Why is it moving so much? Well, her odds only went down from there throughout the night. And so Polymarket was early on the trend and followed and led and was right about the trend throughout the night. Other sort of things to think about: Virginia, I think Harris is going to end up having won by a couple percentage points. Biden won it by 10. So Harris received the lowest. She won the lowest portion of New York City voters in 40 years. So across a range of metrics, it wasn't very close. And I think it's just stepping back and not talking about crypto directly for a moment. I think if you think about, Vice President Harris, really tough headwinds. I don't think any president, any incumbent if we call her the incumbent, has ever won with inflation numbers like they saw during this administration, ever, right? So that's a big headwind. You also have a lot, all the hardship that the country went through during COVID, but then also a lot of what I think people have decided about things like, masking toddlers, closing the schools, which was very detrimental for early childhood education in the end. You see that in all the performance numbers of those kids who didn't get to learn in person. I think a lot of backlash on that as well was negative for them over time. And you did see on a range of issues, former President Trump, he's got, don't get me wrong, some definitely reactionary policy ideas. Immigration is one. I think that people have no idea where he's really going to land on this, but has been calling perhaps for mass deportations, and no one knows. But again, certainly on crypto, very progressive. On energy, very progressive, positive image. Right on trade, right. We don't know what the Democratic ticket's trade policy was. Almost nothing was said. Right. So I think it's not clear that you were gaining new voters, the Democrats. I think this is just my analysis, to be clear. It's not Galaxy's analysis. I'm not saying that the issues that Democrats voted for that drove them to vote for the Democratic ticket are not valid. But to me, when I sort of look at them as policy issues, they feel more like voting against something than voting for it. And I think personally, positivity and voting for something is much more motivational. All right, on crypto, the crypto industry is likely to see significant relief pretty soon. I think it's a big question about what kind of statutory improvements crypto might get, whether we get a market structure bill or a stablecoin bill or whatever. But in the near term, at the federal executive agency level, you're going to see pretty quick changes like the OCC, the FDIC, the FHFA. These Treasury-related seats can be filled immediately, and the Senate has also gone Republican, so it shouldn't be too difficult for Trump appointees to become confirmed. I think at the independent regulatory agencies like the FDIC, the SEC, the CFTC, most agree that the president can't fire an independently confirmed commissioner, a confirmed independent commissioner, but can appoint a new acting chair. I think you'll see either Commissioner Uyeda or Hester Peirce, become acting chair of the SEC pretty quickly. And what happens from there is uncertain, but I think you're likely to see a whole-scale reevaluation pivot of the SEC's posture on the securities versus commodities issue, registration issues, enforcement in the crypto industry's favor. So that's undeniably positive in the near term, I think, for the cryptocurrency industry in America. I think this is going to cause a flood of entrepreneurs to move back to the United States in crypto that had left and had built elsewhere. It's honestly stunning. I think the big questions are, does Trump follow through on his various promises? He made many in Nashville to the Bitcoin 2024 conference. You can't really know the answer to that, but I would say a lot of these things, appointing a new acting commissioner of the SEC, not hard, not hard. Changing the head of the OCC so that national banks can use public blockchains, hold crypto, touch cryptos, not difficult. In fact, Brian Brooks, who was acting OCC or comptroller of the currency at the OCC under Trump's first term, he passed guidances. He issued guidances that already let that happen. I think choke point 2.0, this idea that banks have been unduly pressuring, bank regulators have been unduly pressuring banks not to do business with crypto-linked firms, prohibiting banks from dealing with or touching crypto, very likely to be relaxed. OCC change in posture would do a lot there. Eventually, FDIC, not clear what the Fed, how the extent to which a White House can impact the Fed's involvement there, but they were involved. But again, likely to see material easing. If I had to look forward a couple years, I think it's fair to say we may be entering a golden era for the cryptocurrency industry in America. So, it's going to be exciting. We're going to be here to talk about it. We'll have our friends Tyler Williams and Mike Novogratz back soon to talk about how Galaxy is thinking about it, and what else we might, think on the policy side from Tyler, a longtime friend and return guest. And we've got a lot of other great things planned coming up. But for now, let's get right into it with Bimnet Abibi. Let's go now to our friend Bimnet Abibi from Galaxy Trading. As always, Bimnet, welcome to Galaxy Brains.
Thanks for having me. Nice hat, by the way.
Thank you, sir. I'm blown away. What a week. What a day. Former President Trump won in a landslide last night.
Yes, he did, and it was remarkable. And I think the price reaction that you've had in crypto suggests that it's going to be good for crypto, and I agree. I think you're talking about 4 years of consistently better crypto policy that's going to come from the Trump administration. You're talking about clarity, banks holding crypto on their balance sheets, in-kind create redeems, better funding regulations, derivatives that probably would have launched in either administration, but options on the ETFs. Certain things being securities, or having clear guidelines as to what is a security and what is not. And so I do think that this administration that's coming is going to be transformational for crypto, and that, ignoring the price action you're seeing today, if you're thinking about Bitcoin or other assets over the next 4 years, right, like this is, the start of a pretty aggressive uptrend.
Yeah, it is. And you think about how well cryptos and Bitcoin have performed under the Biden presidency, all-time highs in 21, all-time highs for Bitcoin this year. That was with a big headwind.
Absolutely.
Yeah, a regulatory apparatus that was aligned against it.
A ton of government selling, a ton of supply.
Ton of supply, that's true.
I mean,
so you just imagine, if you get progressive frameworks at the SEC that say allow like tokens to come in with new features. This is one thing people have been talking about with assets like Uniswap or DeFi, like where you could think about the governance token has sort of been designed to sort of adapt to the regulatory situation in the U.S.
Absolutely.
You can't offer any kind of like fee sharing or stuff. They don't think, because they're worried it could be an equity security. I don't know that would specifically will change, but if you get something like Hester Peirce's Safe Harbor, you're going to see a whole new types of tokens that become allowed.
Interest-bearing stables. I mean, there's so many things that, are going to be viewed from a constructive angle
rather than a negative angle, right?
Correct.
We don't know how they turn out, but the posture is about to dramatically change. It
Absolutely.
appears. Yeah. Are we entering a golden age? Transformational.
Yeah. I mean, you could call it a paradigm, but the paradigm shift. But
yeah, there's a lot of people
that
use
may
word
be
aggressive.
But I do think that, crypto aside, there's a lot of other things that are going to come with a Trump administration, and we've spoken about it on the show before. But essentially, Trumponomics.
Yeah. What does
that mean?
Yeah.
Right. And what does that mean when is also important. And so tariff policy is going to be really critical in terms of determining inflation. Our relationships with China, other countries that we trade with, etc. And high level, that stuff's going to be pretty inflationary. His other kind of key thing that he wants to get done is, increase drilling in the U.S., lower oil costs, etc. And so that should offset some of the stuff. But on top of that, he wants to cut taxes as well pretty aggressively. And now that he's got Congress as well as the Senate and
Most
effectively
likely,
a super
yeah,
majority.
we don't know the House yet, but it is leaning Republican. It's going to be close. I mean, Republicans only had a 2-seat majority in the last Congress. Senate is flipped Republican, so agreed. Yeah, probably going to have a pretty fertile ground in Congress for his ideas.
Right. And so I think the probability of like tax cuts is pretty high.
Oh, yeah.
The probability of deregulation via a lack of enforcement of rules or changing of rules is pretty high. And so, these are things that are going to be very pro-growth, stimulative, etc. And that brings me to the bond market, right? And what you've seen happen in the overnight session and at the start of today's trading is you've had, fixed income yields rise by about 20 basis points. And I think they're just getting started, right? It's really tough to think about cutting interest rates, right, when you've got a presidency that is going to cut taxes, that is going to put tariffs, and basically put upward pressure on inflation via these channels. And so, and you already have hot data in the U.S.
Yeah.
And so, I think the Fed's going to be stuck between a rock and a hard place because if you're going to be taking in less deposits, spending more money, and you have to fund this debt at these really high levels, it's going to make you more indebted, et cetera. And so that idea of fiscal dominance is really going to, like the Fed's going to have to grapple with that, right? And so that's what I see developing over the next 4 years is, this dynamic of, the budget and the deficit being so big, inflation not coming down because you've got a president that wants to put more money in people's pockets, that is super aggressive about these pro-growth policies. And so, when you just start doing the math of, you're running a huge national debt and interest rates are really elevated, like it just starts to compound and it's not linear.
It's tricky.
And so, that's really what the Fed's going to have to grapple with. And that's why I think Bitcoin in this kind of fiscal dominance construct should perform well.
Looks like a very good asset, especially if it's a hard money gold-like store of value alternative to gold, coupled with a supportive environment specifically for it. And obviously a fiscal and monetary situation that doesn't look like it's performing that well on the report card, right? Do you think that what is the bull case here? I mean, if he's going to cut and tariff now, I've been one saying the tariffs. Trump loves to set like firm negotiating positions and then dial back in a deal, right? So tariffs might not. I mean, first of all, we already have a fairly
a year.
Yeah, we already have
absolutely.
tariffs that he put in that Biden didn't remove, and
Absolutely.
So yeah, they may take a long time, or they probably won't be as big a magnitude as like a worst case scenario. And we've had tariffs, by the way, throughout this country's history, plenty of times. But let's assume that they are there. So you've got, and then you cut taxes, so you've got less revenue. Like the idea, is that the GDP grows so much? Is the idea that grows that makes up for the lost revenue and the
in theory
and the inflation, basically.
Yeah, but it's just
We haven't really seen that in modern history.
Work. Deficits have only gone one direction over the past decade, right? Or, I mean, basically since Bill Clinton ran a small artificial surplus
right at the end of his presidency.
Yeah. And the next 4 years, if you think about it, right, like these are times when, like Social Security, right? Like you've got forecasts of when that's going to basically start to look unsustainable. Or, I mean, it is already unsustainable, but when you kind of reach that tipping point, I think it's like 2027, 2028, right? And so that's right in the prime of this administration. And then, you've got it depends on if there's a divided Congress or not. You've got all these debt ceiling negotiations that are going to have to happen. I mean, it is... Yeah, it's really hard not to be long-term bullish Bitcoin here. The only risk to that kind of picture is, how the Fed's going to respond to this, right? And if they take the approach of like, my only mandate is to get inflation to reasonable levels.
And
It's
keep
like
rates
you
high or raise
keep rates
rates.
high or raise rates or not cut.
That's
et
bad for
cetera,
all
bad-
financial assets.
Yes, and so at its core, Bitcoin does have elements of being a risk asset, and so yeah, and just think about it. Like if I can earn by not investing in a 60 vol asset, I can just sit and earn 5%. The opportunity cost of holding those assets becomes really high. And so if you look at the price reaction in things like silver and gold today, right? Silver is off like 5%.
So gold was down 3 or something?
Yeah, exactly. And so why is that? Well, that's because the dollar has rallied by 2% and yields have gone up by 20 basis points. And so the alternatives have started to look a lot more
They
attractive.
pay money, right? They're not as bad. The dollar's gaining value, right?
Absolutely.
What is the dollar trade in general? I know this is a very complicated. The FX has got a lot of stuff goes into this, but is it? I mean, is it a reaction to Trump's victory? Like just broadly
Absolutely.
speaking,
Well,
just because he says he wants a strong dollar and his policies are
over time, the data suggests that FX is largely a function of interest rate differentials, and so if I can consistently earn more by being in dollars, right, I'm going to choose that.
Yeah.
And so, when you've got Europe growth slowing and you've got, pro-growth presidency coming, that doesn't bode well.
and they're cutting, but we're still high interest rate. Like
Yes. And so that's
So you buy dollar-denominated assets because you can go into dollar-denominated fixed income securities if you want with the yield high.
Yes, exactly.
So
and it's also, just think about it. Russell's up 5-6% today.
Really, I guess you have the
equities.
Russell.
S&P's
Equity, I
at
saw-
fresh all-time highs.
I saw S&P was 2%.
Yeah,
or-
and you just can't underscore like the huge structural things that are happening in the U.S. economy right now. You are at the crux of an AI boom in the U.S. that requires massive like power investment.
Trump
right?
said we're going to build so much electricity. You're going to say, please, sir, no more electricity, please, sir. But I mean, that's they're going to build electricity. They're going
they have to, right?
So
And
that it's not just the AI that does well. It's all the builders and the
infrastructure.
whatever.
Yes, and then it's like, okay,
energy.
do you get efficiency? Do you become a more productive economy because of the efficiencies that AI has? And so we're going through a big structural change in the U.S. that's very pro-growth and pro-cyclical.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you couple that with the debt, though,
Yeah, the debt though.
it's like, whoa.
Man.
I mean, it's really tough to ignore.
Yeah, it is.
And so, yeah, and then the question is, like, who's he going to appoint to the Fed eventually? Is, who's he going to appoint to the various
Treasury, yeah.
regulatory
Yeah.
bodies, Treasury?
Yeah.
And
He did say we were in the office very late last night on Tuesday night watching these results come in, and I went to bed right before he came on and spoke, which I'm told was around 2:30 in the morning. I did catch some of the speech this morning when I woke up, and he said we're going to be paying down the debt. It's what he said.
I hope he pays it down with Bitcoin.
I was going to say exactly. Yeah, he's previously said he was going to he's like, maybe we write a crypto check, pay it down with Bitcoin. I don't know what that means exactly, but
No, but
and I know
the
he's,
other thing, though.
but
it's
he is at least, and JD Vance is like the only one that's talked about this publicly. Really, also is the debt, right? And so they've said it. I agree. I'm skeptical. It would be very against trend for them to make real progress on that. But
Yeah, and the one thing that I would have to, caution folks on is a second-term presidency for anyone, right?
Yep.
I go back to the White House Correspondents' Dinner the first year after Obama won re-election,
Mm-hmm.
and he gave a speech,
it was something like
it was bucket,
yeah,
right?
His bucket list.
The bucket list.
Oh, stuff.
right?
He's like bucket. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I remember this.
And he was like, "Oh, we need to make changes to immigration policy. Bucket, executive action.
Yeah,
Right? We need to do improve childcare. Bucket, executive action.
Yeah,
right?
it's a good bit.
And so, like the mentality of a second-term president is very different than a first-term.
yeah. You're
president.
legacy seeking, right?
Legacy seeking, but it's also like, I mean, this is a guy who used to be afraid of the court system, right? Like, used to be like,
I mean,
I don't want to get impeached, blah, blah, blah. He's been impeached twice. Yeah. He's been brought up on charges across a number of districts, etc. He's got a Supreme Court now that is packed, right? And
And he doesn't have to run for re-election.
Re-election, and he's got executive privilege and all of these things, and so he is going to feel more emboldened than ever to pursue his policies in the most aggressive ways that, probably blur the line of, kosher.
Who
in
knows?
terms of the
We don't know.
legality of
I
it.
agree, but we don't know. But yes, he's not constrained by running for re-election. Just in case our viewers don't know, the 22nd Amendment prohibits a president from serving more than 2 terms. The only way that you
and there
can't-
are amendments.
Yeah, the
there
only
is a
way-
provision to add amendments as well.
That's true.
in
That's
case
true.
he
We could
wants
limit.
to-
Yeah, that's
a
true.
third presidency.
The only way, I think he actually said yesterday this was his last election. So he is saying, I mean, again, we don't know, but and the only way, by the way, you can get out of that is if you were the vice president or you're in the line of succession and
then
you
you
end up
get to-
taking office because people ahead of you die. Then you can serve out the remainder of that term if it's 2 years or less, and then you could run for 2.
Absolutely.
So, and I didn't mention this yet, but I mean, there's only been one other president in American history that won a second non-consecutive term, Grover Cleveland,
yes.
1892. By the
I was about
way,
to say.
during that election, Benjamin Harrison, who he took it back from, it's kind of flipped. In that case, the Democrat was anti-tariff. Well, he was anti-tariff, but sort of pro-dollar. And Benjamin Harrison, the Republican, was pro-tariff and pro-silver at the time. Very similar. There was a thing called the Sherman Silver Purchase Act that Benjamin Harrison signed that directed the government to stockpile silver. Very similar issues, strangely. But anyway, Trump, I mean, that regardless of other superlatives, from a pure like presidential term standpoint, extremely historic win. And by the way, Grover Cleveland wasn't under investigation, lost a lawsuit, twice impeached. So I think it's fair to call this the biggest political comeback in American history that happened last night. And to be honest, it wasn't close, which is
wasn't close.
pretty impressive. He expanded his leads from 16 and obviously 20 when he lost. He won the largest share of the popular vote at 51.7% since George H.W. Bush in 1988.
It's impressive. And talking about comebacks, can we just talk about how this is at 74,000?
Yeah, we hit the all-time. We broke a new
mean-
all-time high during the results coming in.
Absolutely. And I
It looks
just
like it wants to
remember
go higher.
sitting with you about, a year and a half ago or 2 years ago.
We were not
and-
back. It
And
was over.
it was, BTC 20K.
16.5 to start 2023.
Yes. And so
Less than 2 years ago.
It's been a tremendous journey,
Yeah.
and it's just getting going.
Bitcoin's the only asset that has the people call tulips that makes an all-time high, goes down 80%, and then just makes another new all-time high. You've never seen a
these
chart.
are some of the
never
best
seen a chart
tulips
like
ever.
it. Yeah, exactly. Never seen a chart like it. Well, I'm excited for the next phase.
Absolutely.
And as always, Bimnet and I will be here to talk with you all about it. My friend Bimnet Abibi from Galaxy Trading, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
That's it for this week's episode of Galaxy Brains. Thank you to our friend Bimnet Abibi from Galaxy Trading. As always, everyone have a safe and happy weekend, and we will catch you next week. Thanks for listening to Galaxy Brains, the weekly podcast from Galaxy Research. If you enjoy the show, please like, rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. To follow Galaxy Research, sign up for our weekly newsletter at gdr.email, read our content at galaxy.com/research, and follow us on Twitter at GLXY Research. See you next week.